She cheated and left me for my best friend. She had no idea I was secretly making $500, $0 a year. Hello, everyone. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Now, let's begin the video. Using a throwaway for obvious reasons with certain specifics modified to preserve anonymity. Alright, here's a fully rewritten version of your story, following your guidelines and in a natural, first-person tone. Let me know if you'd like any adjustments or specific extensions. I found out she cheated on me and bolted with my best friend. She had no clue I was secretly pulling in a six-figure income, earning around $500,000 a year. I remember perfectly the moment Olivia decided to blow up our marriage. She was sitting calmly at the kitchen table, scrolling through her phone like she didn't have a care in the world. I had just walked in from work, tired and set to drop my bag and relax, when she looked up and casually announced, "Marcus, I want a divorce." She didn't bother with any kind of intro or softening. No apologies, no explanations, just that blunt, icy statement delivered as casually as if she was commenting on the weather. I hesitated for a second, unsure if I'd heard her right. "Excuse me," I asked, voice surprisingly steady despite the chaos boiling inside me. She repeated herself again like I was slow to get it. All the years I'd spent building my career flashed through my mind. I should have been mad, maybe even devastated. Instead, I was stunned by her nerve. "Divorce," I echoed, trying to process what she just said. It hit me hardest not because of the divorce itself, but because of why she wanted it. She crossed her arms and said outright, "I can't keep living like this. I need someone who actually works, who contributes. This isn't the life I signed up for." I blinked, stunned. She claimed I didn't work. I wanted to laugh, but I kept my composure. For years, I had built my career from scratch, earning enough to set us up for a future most people only dream of. But Olivia, she never once asked how I made my money or showed the slightest interest. She seemed to think I was just coasting by, barely scraping through. I leaned against the counter, studying her. She appeared so confident, so sure that she was making the right choice. "All right," I said softly, placing my bag down. She raised her eyebrows, surprised by my calmness. "Yes, Olivia, if you want a divorce, I won't stand in your way." For a brief moment, I saw a flicker of doubt cross her face, but she quickly masked it with that smug smile she always wore. "Good," she said, "because I already spoke to a lawyer. You need to move out by the end of the month, out of my house." Her nerve was almost laughable, but I didn't argue. If she wanted me gone, I'd leave for now. I said simply, "Fair enough," and turned to head upstairs. I could feel her piercing gaze watching me, waiting for me to give her something, anger, tears, a plea, but I let her see nothing. In the privacy of our bedroom, I sank onto the bed and let the reality sink in. This wasn't just about divorce. It was about control. Olivia wanted to feel like she was the one in charge, making me look like the failure in our relationship. Maybe she thought I'd come crawling back, begging her to stay. But she didn't know me that well, because the following days became an enduring display of passive-aggressive tactics, criticisms on how I folded laundry, how I spent my evenings, even how I brewed my coffee. She went out of her way to find fault with everything, turning me into the villain in her mind. And then there was Brian, my so-called best friend. At first, I didn't think much of her endless mentions of his name. Brian said this or Brian suggested that, not enough to raise suspicion, just enough to irritate. But it soon became obvious it was more than friendship. I didn't confront her right away. I wasn't ready to tip my hand. Instead, I let her think she was still calling the shots, that I was just a clueless, passive husband pretending not to see what was happening right under my nose. One evening, I was packing a few essentials into a suitcase. Olivia leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, smirking. "So," she sneered, "have you figured out where you're going to stay yet?" Her tone dripped with condescension. I zipped up the bag and faced her gently. "Don't worry about me, Olivia. I'll be just fine." She huffed, clearly annoyed that I wasn't breaking apart. "Good, because Brian and I are hosting a dinner party here next weekend. It'd be awkward if you still were hanging around." She paused, almost impressed. "A dinner in my house with my best friend and my ex-husband." I sighed, shoulders relaxed. "Don't worry," I said simply. "I'll be gone well before then." As I moved past her, I caught a glimpse of her smug smile. She thought she'd won. She believed I was retreating in defeat. But what she didn't get was that she just handed me the match to a fuse I'd been quietly saving. If she wanted to burn everything down, I'd let her. I'd sit back, watch the flames swallow her and Brian whole. Sometimes silence is the best revenge. Patience, letting others dig their own grave while you prepare in the shadows. That's what I was doing. Betrayal, it's a sneaky, insidious thing. It doesn't announce itself with fireworks or fanfare. It sneaks in, casual chats, seemingly innocent gestures, until one day you realize your supposed rock-solid reality has eroded. The divorce was the first. Crack. What followed was the slow crumble of everything I thought I knew about her and about Brian, my so-called best friend. I should have seen it sooner, but sometimes hindsight's a cruel teacher. At first, Olivia's mentions of Brian became more frequent. Brian this, Brian that. She'd casually say things like Brian said this, or Brian recommended that. I'd just nod, thinking nothing of it. He was a close friend after all. But over time, her words carried a strange warmth, and her mentions became more frequent. The first red flag went off on a Saturday afternoon. Olivia came back from lunch with Brian, cheeks flushed and smiling like she hadn't in years. When I asked what was so funny, she waved me off with a dismissive, "Oh, just something Brian said." She insisted I wouldn't understand. I knew then that I'd been blind much earlier than I wanted to admit. I'd started noticing more. Her sly smiles as she typed with her phone, locking it quickly, her dressing up more often when she had plans with Brian, all the tiny signals that something was off. She'd say, "We're just friends," or accuse me of overthinking. Overthinking, it's a favorite excuse for guilty people trying to shift blame. But I didn't confront her. What would have been the point? She'd deny everything or spin a story to make me look paranoid. So I stayed silent, busy with my own life, pretending not to notice her unraveling. The biggest blow hit when Brian arrived uninvited one evening while I was packing. I was literally stuffing belongings into a suitcase when he strolled right through the front door, confident as ever. "Marcus, my man," he said, grinning like we were still best friends. "How's it going?" I stared at him with all the patience I could muster. "What do you want, Brian?" I asked. My tone was even controlled. He leaned against the wall, trying to come across as casual. "Just checking in. Olivia said you're moving out. I wanted to see if you needed any help." Help from the guy who was about to move into my house. The audacity almost made me laugh. "I've got it handled," I said curtly, turning back to my packing. But Brian lingered. I caught the wheels turning in his head, the way he wasn't just here out of concern. No. He wanted to rub it in to make his claim. "Look," he said, voice carefully sincere, "I know it's tough. Things happen in life, you know, unexpected stuff." I faced him fully now, taking a slow step closer. "Yeah, Brian, things happen, and sometimes they come back to bite you." That was all it took. The confident smirk on his face faltered. Uncertainty flickered in his eyes. I didn't wait for him to gather himself. I turned back to my suitcase, dismissing him entirely. "You've always been a cool guy, Marcus," he said awkwardly, heading toward the door. "No hard feelings, right?" I didn't answer. I just sat there, knowing silence speaks louder than words when someone's desperately looking for a reaction. He left without another word. Watching his car fade down the street, I exhaled the breath I hadn't realized I was holding. That night, lying in the bed that would soon no longer be mine, I replayed the past few months. The missed signals, the lies, the betrayal. I could have been furious, could have demanded answers, but what would that have changed? They already considered me irrelevant, just a footnote. What Olivia and Brian didn't realize was that I'd been paying attention all along, taking mental notes, plotting my next move. If they thought they could walk away as if nothing had happened, they had another thing coming. Because betrayal isn't over when it's exposed. That's when the real game begins. And trust me, I was ready to play and win. Divorce, such a tiny word for something so chaotic. It seemed final, simple. But as Olivia and I entered that courtroom, I saw it differently. To her, it was a victory lap, a celebration of her so-called upgrade. She looked sharp, dressed to impress, smiling with confidence that made my stomach churn. Just behind her, like a shadow, was Brian. Of course, he didn't step into the courtroom. That wouldn't be proper, but his presence was crystal clear. Her little stunt, her betrayal, a badge of honor for her. "Marcus, let's not drag this out," she said when we sat across from each other for negotiations. "I don't want this to be harder than it needs to be." I laughed softly inside. She'd already made it hard, stomping over years of our marriage as if it was some worn-out rug she was ready to replace. I kept my voice steady. "I won't fight. The house, some furniture, a portion of my savings, whatever you want, it's yours." She looked surprised, confused even. "You're okay with all this?" "Why wouldn't I be?" I replied evenly. "It's just stuff." For a moment, doubt flickered in her eyes. She thought she'd won, that she'd walk away with everything that mattered. But what she didn't understand was that the house, her prized possession, was actually just a rental in my name. I'd used it as a workspace when I started freelancing years ago. The real wealth, hidden in investments she'd never even heard of, was secure. As we signed the papers, Olivia leaned back confidently, glad we handled this like adults. I nodded, biting back a smile. A week later, I packed up and walked out of her house. I left her everything she'd asked for: furniture, the shabby decorations, even the fancy gadgets she'd never touched. Not worth the trouble to take. Brian, of course, wasted no time moving in. I saw a neighbor's picture of him unloading boxes into the place, Olivia standing on the porch with her same smug smile. They thought they were building some perfect life. Little did they know they were building a house of cards. What she didn't realize, I'd already been collecting evidence, texts, photos, even GPS data showing her affair with Brian months before the divorce. I could have used it to blow everything up, but I chose not to. Why? Because dragging it out in court would have just prolonged their suffering. I wanted karma to do its thing, and I wanted to see it happen firsthand. In the weeks that followed, I focused on my career. Opportunities kept knocking, more contracts, better pay. My income skyrocketed, surpassing $533 a year. I wasn't just doing well, I was thriving. I kept it low-key, though. Why flaunt riches she'd already underestimated? Let her cling to that misconception. Instead, I turned inward, upgraded my apartment to a sleek city penthouse, floor-to-ceiling windows, modern design, a view I loved every morning. My place was a symbol of my success, my effort, my new beginning, free from the bitterness of the past. My days were packed with meetings, projects, and new ventures. My nights, for me. I started reconnecting with old friends, making new ones, living a life full of potential I'd never had before. And every now and then I'd get a message, or hear through mutual friends, about Olivia and Brian's latest mess. More debt, more arguments, more regret. Once I even got a text from a mutual friend about a housewarming party Olivia was throwing. I just chuckled. They still craved validation, still tried to pretend everything was perfect. The truth was clear. Olivia's shiny new life was built on lies and sweeping problems under the rug. That foundation was already cracking. One evening, sitting in my apartment, I looked out at the city skyline and felt peace. Olivia thought she'd won, but she had no idea what she'd truly lost. And Brian, well, he was about to learn that taking what isn't yours comes with a price. I wasn't rushing anything. I believe revenge is best served cold. And I was just getting started. Maybe Olivia envisioned a picture-perfect life: weekend brunches, tropical getaways, the glow of new romance. But that dream fell apart quickly. I stayed quiet. I didn't need to intervene. Their own greed and betrayal were doing all the work for me. Rumors spread, dinners canceled, vacations canceled, walls of that rented house echoing with arguments. News traveled fast. Olivia was falling apart, and her once impeccable appearance was slipping away. One day, a friend called with a laugh, "Marcus, you won't believe it. Olivia and Brian are in trouble. They're months behind on rent." I was amused but not surprised. They fought so hard to get that house, only to find out they couldn't afford it anymore. It got better. Brian lost his job. Olivia's life of show and sparkle was unraveling. One night I got a message from Olivia. "Marcus, I need to talk. It's urgent." I hesitated, then responded, "What's wrong?" Her reply was almost immediate. "Brian and I are going through a tough time. Could you help us out with a small loan?" I almost laughed. The woman who left me for her better man, who publicly flaunted her independence, now begged for help. I replied, "Sorry, I can't help," and left it at that. A week later, they'd been evicted. The landlord couldn't ignore the unpaid rent any longer, so they moved into some roach-infested apartment on the city's edge. A neighbor's call later described Olivia's broken-down state, Brian's aging appearance, completely different from the confident man she once knew. I didn't gloat. That's not what this was about. Their downfall was their own doing. Olivia had traded stability for a fantasy, and Brian was reaping what he'd sown. A quick trip to the store later, I ran into Olivia. She saw me, froze, and her confident exterior was gone. "Marcus," she said softly. I kept my tone neutral. "Olivia." She looked defeated, her aura of smug arrogance totally gone. "I hope you're doing okay," I said plainly. She nodded hurriedly, avoiding eye contact, rushing away. As I watched her walk off, I felt a strange mix, satisfaction, yes, but also pity. She had made her choices and they'd brought her here. She fought for that life and now she was trapped in it. My father once told me, sometimes karma doesn't need a push, it just needs patience. It catches up eventually. And it did. One morning, just after a client call, I saw Olivia's number on my screen. Honestly, I was tempted to ignore it, but curiosity got the best of me. I answered calmly. "Marcus speaking." Her voice wavered, nervous, almost pleading. "Marcus, we need to talk." I leaned back, setting myself ready. "What's this about, Olivia?" There was a pause, then she stumbled out a vague explanation about Brian and herself struggling. She asked if I could help with a loan. "Just a small one," she said, "to get back on their feet." I couldn't help but laugh. The woman who left me in the dust, ridiculed me, and flaunted her new relationship, now wanted my help. I replied, "Sorry, I can't help," and ended the call. A week later, the eviction notice came through. Olivia and Brian had run out of options and moved into some crumbling apartment. I heard from a friend that Olivia looked worn out, Brian looked years older. The life she fought so hard for was crashing down around her. I didn't gloat or rub it in. I understood that they'd created their own downfall. They traded stability for an illusion, and now it was all falling apart. As I reflect on everything, I realize the best revenge isn't loud or dramatic. Sometimes it's just quiet success, letting the truth unfold in its own time. Watching Olivia and Brian drown in their own choices gives me a strange sense of peace. Their carefully crafted fairy tale was just that, a fairy tale. Now their house of cards is tumbling, and I'm building a life that's truly mine. I promised myself after everything, I'd never let their betrayal define me. Instead, I'd drive forward, stronger, wiser, and happier. The day I finally moved into that sleek city apartment, I knew I'd come a long way. It's not just a home, it's a symbol of the new life I created. Business boomed, new opportunities came pouring in, more than I could have imagined. My income soared past $500,000 and I was truly flourishing. I kept my success low-key, letting her think I was still the man who didn't work much, because her misjudgment worked perfectly in my favor. I reconnected with old friends, met new ones, people who genuinely valued me for who I was, not what I could do for them. I dedicated time to myself, rediscovering passions like writing and photography. I started a blog, my story of rising from betrayal, turning pain into progress. And I'd hear snippets of Olivia and Brian's downward spiral. Their debts, their fights, their regrets, they became a cautionary tale among our circle. The latest update, they're drowning. Brian was caught texting another woman, an even younger one, from his new job. Olivia, once so proud, lost her composure in public, screaming at him in a cafe and throwing her drink. Their relationship, built on lies, crumbled. Brian was reckless. He thought he could risk everything for temporary pleasure. Olivia didn't handle the betrayal well either. Her world was unraveling and she was desperate. One day she called me abruptly, begging for help. I leaned back, unimpressed. "What do you want, Olivia?" "Marcus," she said, voice shaky, "we're really in trouble. Please, just a little help." I shook my head. "You left me for Brian thinking he was better. Now you want me to fix your mess. Sorry, but I'm not your safety net." She tried to argue, but I cut her off. "You made your choice. Live with it." I walked away from the phone. Later, I heard Brian had moved out, leaving Olivia on her own in a rundown apartment. not able to pay bills, probably realizing too late the man she thought was her ticket to happiness was just as unreliable as I'd always said. Her life, once a bold pursuit of happiness, was now nothing but scraps. Her family and friends had deserted her, tired of her drama. The house she fought so hard for, gone. The truth was, her betrayal had blown everything apart, and I didn't need to lift a finger. Karma had already done the work. There's a strange satisfaction in watching people like her and Brian fall. They think they're clever, that they can manipulate and betray their way into happiness. But the universe has a way of humbling them. They crash, they burn. While they unravel, I thrive. My work continues to flourish, revenue climbing, opportunities multiplying. I'm not just surviving, I'm living a life I'm proud of, filled with purpose and peace. And I don't need anyone's validation to know I've won. I built a better future, surrounded by people who truly value me. I'm writing my story now in my own way. The chapter with Olivia and Brian, it's closed. This is my life, and I'm the one shaping it exactly how I want.